Hi, I'm Matt Malala with Oracle, and today we're going to walk you through a brief history of business intelligence. I'm going to do this presentation along with my colleague Samar Lotia, and he'll introduce himself in just a moment. So, just a quick little bit of information on me. I manage a team of developers building out analytic experiences. We build a product called Oracle Analytics Cloud, and I help deliver a lot of those features along with a great team of developers. I graduated with actually a degree in finance. My background is not computer science. I was self-taught. To be a little cheeky, I like to say before Google, all on the job and personal experience with computer science. And over the years, I've created a few products and R&D roles and other roles, consulting roles that I've had over the years. I started with a company called Hyperion in 1997, and we were acquired by Oracle in 2007. So that's a pretty long tenure at technically one company because we count the previous history as one long job. I'm really into football, American football. To clarify, I love both college and pro. So if we have college fans here, I happen to be a parent of kids who go to Big Ten schools. So on Wisconsin and go green for MSU. And I'm really passionate about one particular movie because it's the best movie of all time. So I really like to say, don't argue with me on what the best movie of all time is because it is Top Gun. And I'm a little bit disappointed and upset, but patiently awaiting Top Gun Mavericks. So, with that said, let's jump into the topic at hand. And before we get into the history, what we'd like to do is kind of level set by taking you through a demo of our product, which we consider modern analytics. And I think this will help give you some perspective as Summer walks you through the history of business intelligence. So, we'll start off with where it is today. Let me get started with the demo. Hey, in this demo, I'm a business user who got an email with a spreadsheet in it. This is a really common business intelligence use case that's happened for many, many, many years. That's great. I'll go ahead and tap the spreadsheet and try and open it. Now you can see I get a nice grid of data that I can hardly read at this point. But my phone allows me to do some great stuff, and I can go ahead and open it in one of my many apps on my phone. I can use Excel or Google Drive or whatever I want. I'm going to choose Excel, and now I have a spreadsheet. So I'm looking at a spreadsheet. The context of the email was to find some information about sales and orders, and I can find data, but I really can't find information at this point. I can look at a data cell, but there's not much to tell here. So here I'm going to jump into our Oracle Analytics app, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to import that data set that I saved into my iCloud drive from that email. And right away, the system, our analytics system, is going to analyze the data and it's going to break it down into its pieces. So I have numbers and I have text, and it gives me a little chance to edit this or do some data preparation. So I realize year is really an attribute, so I'm going to switch it from a number to an attribute. Really just some basic things to do because I'm on a phone. I hit save, and then it prompts me to open that data set. Then it presents me with a really whimsical way to kind of select data from that data set. I want to create a project with this, so I'll choose some key items here. I'll choose region, I'll choose sales, I'll choose month and cost. These are the columns that I really want to analyze quickly on my phone. I can grab more, but I'll just hit next here. And right away, it starts to create charts. It does really dense charts at the top and shows the breakdown of cost, sales, region, and month. And it really gives me a great way to decide whether or not I need this chart or I want this chart for my analysis. So I can actually swipe to the right to add it, and then I can swipe to the left if I don't really want the chart. And I can kind of go through these stack of charts one at a time and decide which I want and which I don't. So I'll add the sales chart, I'll remove this cost. A lot of data here, and it's doing this all on the fly, so it's still loading some of it, but I can still go ahead and add the sales by month here and sales by region by swiping to the right while it's loading. It's still loading, but I'll just go ahead and hit finish here. You can see all the previews at the bottom, and I will save this project. Now, I'm just going to give it some kind of quick, clever name here. I'll call it 2021 sales data. Having a little trouble typing, but we'll get that cleaned up here. Sales data, and then I am done, and it will save that project and ask me to open it, which is the next logical step here on my phone. and I can see all those visualizations get loaded. Even the ones that were still loading in the background are done by now, and I can see sales by month down at the bottom here. I can tap open one of the charts and I can get into a lot more details. I can tap through some of the tooltips and get some details about the central region. I can visually see that West is outperforming other regions, and I can see each month broken down in my stacked bar chart here. If I want, I can hit the info button down at the bottom and get some quick insights without really doing anything. My highs, my lows, regions that are overperforming, things like that. And then if I tap the menu item on the top right, that will give me a text summary of what's going on. It uses our NLG engine as part of our platform, and it summarizes all the data on the fly for the user. So really great use cases for some quick analysis that I can do right on my phone. I can even share it or email, some of these results to someone if I wanted to. But one of the cool things is oftentimes I want to get this information, but I'm busy, I'm working out, or I'm on the road. And what I can do is I can just tap and hold on that project I just created and ask to listen to the podcast. So I'll tap listen to the podcast, turn up my volume, and it will kick off a summary.
Represents sales for a total of 12 months. Breakdown per month. When taken together, the 12 months.
So I'm not going to bore you with watching or listening to that entire podcast, but you get the idea. I can just listen to the information while I'm busy or having a workout or whatever. And this is a great way to kind of get at the details on your device or on the go. So now really let's jump into the second part of our demo. And you might be finished on the phone, you've gotten some information, but now you're on your commute. Maybe you're listening to that podcast on the commute. I'm pretending I still commute, but here I am at home doing this video. And but now I'm back in the office. I'm on my desktop browser, and I'm actually showing you a real Oracle Analytics instance. This is one we use for our development operations. I've gone ahead and uploaded those data set and projects to this instance. You saw that on the phone. So this is the actual project and data set I just uploaded. So there's that sales data project. I'll go ahead and open that. And the charts should look really familiar because you just saw them on the phone, and they look a lot, they're a lot alike. I can expand this. You can see it's the same chart, but obviously I have more space. I can move around a little more freely. I can see tooltips, and I'll be able to do a whole lot more from an authoring perspective and a deeper, richer analysis perspective. One of the things I noticed right away about this data set, though, is it has some great information, but I want to augment it. I had a chance on my phone to do some quick, data manipulation, but now I want to do more. I might, want to create a calculation based on these metrics here. So what I can do for that is I jump into the section on the project called data. It's just a quick shortcut to my data set, and I can go ahead and edit that. That same data set you saw on the home page, I'm editing it here on a new tab. And you see obviously the same columns you saw on the phone, but obviously there's much richer data. It has some information above each column, giving you some quick insights into what the column of data is. I can tap on or click on region, and I see all the enrichments I can do on region. Just because it's a region, it understands all these enrichments I might be able to do. Or I can go to order date. This is the one where I was looking for, is I want to create a day of the week column. I'm really interested in how orders come in on various weekdays, whether weekends are stronger or weekdays and things like that. And with one click, it's able to create that from the date. I can also just do some data set cleanup if I wanted to. I can rename things. I won't bore you with everything, but I'll just go to the right here. Row count was in that data set for whatever reason, and I don't need it for my analysis, so I'm going to hide it. It might be useful in calculations, but I don't need to show it to end users. Now let's go ahead and create that simple calculation. So I'm just going to do more of a raw calc. You can do lots of complex calculations, and I won't get into that. I'll keep it simple with profit, and I'll just do sales, and I can type ahead and just choose my sales metric minus cost, which will give me a basic profit calculation. I'll just hit validate and then add step, and now we have profit. You can see my profit column there. You can also see all the steps that I did to create these, and I can edit these, move these around if I wanted to, but I'll just hit apply script. I'm ready to go. I've augmented my data set enough, and I can jump back into my project, and I'll jump over to the visualize tab. Right away you'll notice that on the left you can see the new columns I added, the weekday and then the profit column that I've added. And I'm kind of ready to begin my analysis. Now this was that same analysis from the phone. For now I'm going to leave it alone. I want to start to do some kind of like ad hoc, rich analytics, self-service analysis. And I'm going to jump in and create a new canvas to do that. I'll go ahead and grab sales, and then I'm going to grab costs, and I want to compare that with an attribute. So I can choose state. That might be a little too much grain to start off with, so I think I'll actually start off with region. So I'll just drag this out there and let the system decide what the best chart is. So our chart recommendation engine kicks in, gives me a scatter chart because I had two metrics, and it's important to compare those two metrics. And you can see there's not many data points here, but I can see a little anomaly emerging. So all these are kind of linear, where cost grows, sales grow, except for the West, where cost isn't growing at quite the same rate that sales is growing. It might be interesting. It's an interesting observation, but I need to really dive in further. So in order to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead now, and I will add units sold into the mix, and I will add profit into the mix to see if there's any other anomalies here. So profit's my size and units sold is my color. So again, we're seeing that West is kind of a standout. It's got high profit, lots of units sold, which I expect, but the cost is kind of a little bit lower than every other region in relationship to sales. So I'm going to grab state to figure out what state's really driving that, or if there are multiple states driving it. And right away, there's an anomaly that stands out. Super obvious. I got this cluster of data down at the bottom. Interesting stuff, and I can scan through it, but they're all kind of acting the same. Nothing really stands out for me, but California totally stands out. And again, it's a great observation. I might be able to let people know in email, just reply, hey, the region you want to dive into is California, but I'm going to go a little further here. I'm going to swap out state for customer, because what I want to do is identify the customers that are really driving this anomaly. So, there's a big cluster down at the bottom again with some outliers kind of hanging out, but there's a lot more here. There's not one that stands out. There's a few that I might want to investigate. So I'm going to narrow this down, and I could have started with just the West because we found that, or just California, but I really just want to look at my top customers. I don't care what region they're in. I want to look at my, top 10, top 20 customers. So I'll start off with top 10 customers by profit. That's showing a few, but I want to go a little deeper here. I'll go 20. I want to find all the standouts and really be able to do a proper analysis. So what's interesting is I see a lot of customers that are high profit, high sales. They're driving a lot of our revenue, and the cost is low. So I might be able to use this information in a marketing campaign, or extract this and send it to someone. But I do want to further my analysis a little more. I'm going to go ahead and look at regions. That was one of the original asks in the email. You may not have been able to read that on the screen, but I'll look at regions by sales, and I can see that West stands out visually on a chart like this. You can kind of see the standouts. But I can ask our machine learning engine to show us the outliers, do some statistical analysis on this data. Might have been obvious that East and West were going to be the outliers here, but I'll drag something in that's a little more dense, like state, and you can really see that it's going to point out all the outliers, and you might find some that are more interesting than you realized, or that didn't exist in the East or the West. Wisconsin might be one that kind of stands out as, well, California obviously stands out, but Wisconsin off to the right there stands out as one that maybe we need to investigate why their sales are so low. Are we just not selling a lot there? Do we don't focus there? Whatever the case may be. Like any other great analytics tool, I can resize things and get perspective the way I want. I can also select regions of data in a chart and really narrow my focus. So maybe I just want to go after California and these states here on the left, kind of selecting these randomly, but I'll just say, keep these only, and it'll affect both the visualization. So I'll see my top 20 customers for those states only. And also you'll notice some outliers kind of come up to the surface because I've kind of narrowed the data set, and I can see that certain states within that set are outliers, which is interesting. This is great stuff that I can share with my colleagues and maybe make some business decisions off of. But now I want to actually, instead of just sharing the results or like a quick answer in email, I'm going to actually share this project, but I want to make it a dashboard. I want to make it nice and clean and put some more details in it. So I'm going to call that my region customer analysis. And then I'm going to rename this one to my order overview, just so that it's more readable and easy and easily understandable for the users who are going to get this. Now these are the visualizations I started with in the phone, and they're great, but I want to kind of enhance this. And one of the things I like is to put these key metrics across the top. So I'll have sales and I'll have profit going to reorder things a little bit to make it look nice. Let me grab profit here and drag it next to sales, and then I'll throw units sold in between sales and profit. And these numbers are a little more precise than I need for this type of analysis, so I'm going to go ahead and change the number format, and I'll go ahead and choose currency, and I will choose abbreviation on. Now, units sold is obviously not a currency, so I'm going to go ahead and switch that back to a number. So you can do some great features like multi-select and clean up fonts and change formats and things like that. It's all really easy to do. Here's some interesting charts from my phone, which are great, but this one might be a little too complex, and it's kind of a small chart with lots of data that's taking up too much space that I don't really need to look at. I don't really want to see things by month, so I'll get rid of that. I have plenty of other month breakdowns in these other visualizations. This one I want to use our machine learning engine to be able to get those outliers again and have it kind of just stand out. It's really interesting, and I'll also apply that same outlier on the region one that I did in my previous canvas. Now, what's interesting though is I want users to be able to easily pull out details from these visualizations. So I'm going to take a visualization. Actually, maybe I'll use a sales by month one. It's got some outliers on here, but I'm going to create something very similar to that. I'm going to take sales, and then I'll grab month. Actually, I'll just do just months instead of getting into order dates. And I will switch that visualization to our natural language visualization, our language narrative, we call it. And that's actually going to do that same NLG engine on our platform is going to be run here, and it's going to give you a text description of what's going on in those months with sales, which is a great way customers, end users of this dashboard can read this and be able to ascertain what's going on just by reading the text. And if the data changes, obviously the text is going to change. So now one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to add some details. So everyone in business intelligence and analytics really loves tables, and they love all the details they can get at. So I'm going to grab like a whole bunch of these metrics here and attributes, and I'm just going to select the visualization. I'm going to pick one of our most heavily used visualizations, which is a good old table, and just throw it on there. Organizationally, this isn't that great. I could rearrange things and move columns around, but I really like the pivot table, which is a great variation of it that's used in analytics a lot. And it's going to give the breakdown of category, product, region, state, month, and show me all of my various metrics. Just in this table, just all kinds of details that user can go crazy with. At this point, I have kind of a dashboard structure, some great information that a user can get just by opening this. They don't have to go through that whole analysis I went through. I don't need to send them a spreadsheet anymore. I can just hit save here. The funny thing is, or the really interesting thing is, in business intelligence and analytics, what we found over the years is we'll share these dashboards with folks, and our customers will love them and they'll be great, but they always come back to one use case that we're investing a lot in all the time, which is export. So we'll export this to none other than a CSV file, which can be opened in a spreadsheet. So just like the start of the use case, I'm going to create a CSV file that I could attach to an email and send to someone else, and maybe they can start this kind of a whole journey over again with this data that I've narrowed down for them. So look, that's a quick overview of our Oracle Analytics platform. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot more to modern analytics, but that was hopefully a good preview of what it looks like. And I think it will help kind of set the table for Summer's presentation on the history of business intelligence. So I'm going to hand it over to Summer for him to introduce himself and walk you through the history of business intelligence. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Summer Lotia, and hello from the Oracle campus in Redwood Shores in the San Francisco Bay Area. I thought it would be nice to introduce myself from the campus. Behind me you can see the Oracle racing boat as well as our buildings on our lovely campus here. Again, as I said, my name is Summer Lotia, and I run the Oracle Analytics engineering, product engineering team. A little bit about myself. My academic background is all in applied math and economics. I have a bachelor's in math, economics, and physics, and I was a PhD candidate in economics and financial economics at the University of Chicago, and I have a degree in financial mathematics from the University of Minnesota. As someone fresh out of sort of college, my first job really was as a software developer, but then I took a slight detour working as an actuary, for those of you who know what that field is. And then I pretty quickly came back to software, and sort of have, since then I've always worked as a software engineer or managing software teams. So now you might be wondering what that little graphic to the side of me is about. Well, if you can read the text at the bottom, that might give you a little bit of a hint. So we're clear, the DC comic book universe is a lot better and superior to the Marvel comic universe. And it's important to keep those two straight, as I'm pretty sensitive about that. All right, so what is business intelligence? Over the years, lots of different terms have been used to describe the field. People have, associated different definitions with it. In fact, as we were researching this topic, we ran into some really old names that we'd forgotten about, and which were entire product classes in their own. Executive information systems being one of those. And then, of course, there's business intelligence and the flavor of the day, which is analytics. Now, terms come and go, technologies come and go. At least we feel what the essence of this field is about is really bringing the scientific process and a certain scientific rigor to business strategy and business decision making. So let's try to sort of put this in a visual, really, right, to see if we can make it easier. So, put simply, we've got these troves of data lying everywhere, and we've got this little magical BI factory in the middle that's trying to sort it and make sense of it, and produce insights and visualizations and graphs and really knowledge for business workers. So how did we get here? Before we embark on our timeline, just a few quick things. The history of BI is intertwined with the history of technology as a whole. So as we walk our timeline, we'll try to draw attention to other important events in the history of technology and talk a little bit about how they impacted our industry and influenced our industry. And secondly, we will shamelessly claim our own slice of pie, if you will, and attribute perhaps more to ourselves than might be fair. But nevertheless, we'll talk about our own work and our own contributions to this industry as well. And apologies in advance for that. So let's get started. So we start really in 1865 with Richard Miller Devens and his write-up in the Cyclopedia of Commercial and Business Anecdotes. Now he's talking about Sir Henry Furness, a banker who's using information and acting on it quicker than his competitors, and therefore sort of handsomely earning profits. And that's the first use that we see in the literature of the term business intelligence. Fast forward 100 years, and the term occurs again in the IBM Systems Journal by a researcher named Hans-Peter Loon. Now, if you read the paper, what he's describing is actually much more like a modern internet search engine. He's got ideas about information retrieval in there. He's got concepts of, sort of sorting and indexing and storing documents, and of course, serving them up, to the right business audience and so on. So the point being that the field really, isn't really defined. People are really, circling various different ideas and trying to think about, how they can really leverage data and insights to gain business advantages. 1970s bring about some really seminal innovations, which I think really focus the industry as a whole. So in 1970 specifically, Ted Codd publishes his paper on relational algebra and on relational database systems, and he's while he's at IBM working hard, trying to convince the suits that they really ought to commercialize his technology. He's doing everything he can. He's trying to get customers to talk to IBM execs, but as often happens with startups, a scrappy little trio beats him to the punch. And in 1979, Software Development Laboratories launches Oracle version 2.3. Three gentlemen by the names Larry Ellison, Bob Miner, and Ed Oates launched that, what we know now today as the Oracle database. Now, why version 2.3, you might ask? So there's a rumor, completely unfounded, that Larry said no one wants to pay for version 1, hence 2.3. So now, at this point, we'll pause a little bit and see where we are in history. So 2 years ago, in 1977, the Apple II has launched, and it's become wildly popular with, of course, the home crowd, the hobby crowd. And the IBM PC is just around the corner, and as it did with everything else, it's going to have an outsized effect on the BI industry as well. The other thing that happens in 1979 is the launch of VisiCalc. And now, what is VisiCalc? Now, I guarantee if I showed it to you, all of you would recognize it as a modern spreadsheet tool. It's got that same familiar grid interface, that same idea of sort of writing formulas, doing calculations, and it's the killer app for the Apple II. It really takes off and becomes extremely popular, and gives business workers, data workers everywhere a very easy metaphor for sort of working with data, manipulating data, and so on. All right. So before we move on, just two quick things I'd like to note. One is, in the bottom bottom left, you see something called Express that shows up. It's a technology that I'll talk a little bit about later. It showed up in the 1970s, so noting it there. The other thing I'd like to draw your attention to is anything that's blue is something that is, either was developed at Oracle or was an acquisition that came into Oracle and grew from there. So you'll see that theme repeated as we move forward. Moving ahead, as we said, the IBM PC is about to arrive on the landscape, and it's going to change everything. In particular, it's going to fork our timeline. We have along the top sort of server-oriented products, and along the bottom, what I'll call productivity tools. So the PC's here, 1980s, innovation continues on all dimensions. We've got the top axis where the likes of Teradata and Redbrick are bringing, truly unique innovations to the analytics database market. You've got things ranging from, novel new indexing techniques to massively parallel processing techniques, and bringing groundbreaking speed and performance improvements to analytic workloads. On the bottom edge, you've got the spreadsheets that continue to march forward. Lotus 123 launches in 1983 and becomes a runaway success with their particular user interface and their way of sort of menuing and the power of their spreadsheet. Plus it runs on the PC, so it runs everywhere. And in 1985, Excel is launched by Microsoft. Now, many of you may not know this, but the first version of Excel was a Mac-only product. It was only later that they ported it to Windows. And that's because the Mac was the sort of dominant graphical, desktop operating system at the time, before Windows really matured and got better. Now, you might ask why all the focus on spreadsheets. Well, the reason is that spreadsheets, really were the first BI tool. They had this concept of no code that we'll touch on, a few times through this timeline, that gave knowledge workers a familiar, easy interface to manipulate data. And arguably, they still are one of the most important BI tools out there. Now, of course, they have their own sets of limitations, which is why, there's a whole new wave of innovation that'll show up in the 90s that we'll talk about. But before we go there, I actually want to draw your attention to this one pretty revolutionary kind of product that's there in 1984 in the middle. Now, there's a gray box with an integrated monitor. It's got a mouse. You might think this is the Apple Macintosh. Well, it's not. It's the Metaphor DIS, or the Metaphor Data Interpretation System. So what's going on is we've got this sort of dichotomy of tools right now. We've got these database systems like Oracle, Teradata, Redbrick, that really are becoming the stores of corporate data, but they're hard to access. There's security restrictions. The language to access them is technically challenging. And then you've got these spreadsheet tools that are super easy to use, but they have a hard time getting to the stores of corporate data. And so Metaphor comes along and brings this completely vertically integrated solution that brings together relational database technology, it brings together spreadsheets, word processors, a graphical workflow system, all packaged in a completely vertically integrated solution with their own unique hardware. They're doing things like bringing, and their real unique innovation is, again, this no-code environment. They've brought in no-code user experience to the business, which allows business users to access corporate stores of data and perform their data workflows. It's really everything that a modern BI system that you saw the demo for does. But they're doing this 30 years ago, and they're doing other things like leveraging hardware innovations. 32-bit processors have just become cheap enough, and that's what they use in their system, and it gives much better computing capacity than was available to the average business worker at the time. Anyway, it's a pretty unique product and 30 years old, and I think it's worth drawing attention to it. You might also ask, why does it look so much like a Macintosh? Well, the reason's pretty simple. The founders were actually from the Xerox Spark lab, which is where the Alto was born. And if, for those of you who don't know, the Alto really is the inspiration for the Apple Macintosh as well as Windows, and hence the resemblance. Anyway, moving back to the 1990s, we've got, the innovation trend continues. We've got, on the BI tools axis, we've got a few things happening. So in 1992, in particular, there's a pretty revolutionary technology called Essbase, which shows up on our top axis. Now, this is arguably the most successful implementation of a purpose-built multi-dimensional database on the planet. They're a class of something which is referred to as an OLAP system, which was a term coined by Ralph Kimball of Redbrick and Metaphor and Xerox Spark fame in the early 90s as well. There's a little bit of controversy associated with that as well, because the accusation was that Arbor Software, the maker of Essbase, paid Kimball to write that paper and to coin that term, of course, touting their own technologies. Not that it takes away anything from their achievement, which truly was monumental, but nevertheless, it had a little bit of, a bit of a sullied term for a bit. On the bottom axis, the innovation is continuing as well. So there's a new wave of BI tools that emerged that are focused on a completely graphical way, again, repeating that no-code theme, of accessing the corporate store of data. Drag and drop interfaces to create visuals, unique new types of visualizations, in particular, the pivot table. Hopefully most of you have, know what a pivot table is and have used it at some point in your lives in spreadsheet tools. Well, it turns out it originated in BI tools in the early 90s. Brio had a tool called Data Pivot, and Cognos also had similar tools, and they really pioneered that concept, which very quickly got ported into spreadsheet tools, because it truly is a really unique and extremely effective way of looking at grids of data. And the other interesting tidbit about the BI tools from the early 90s is that the Swedes had sort of an outside presence here. So out of the 6 companies I've chosen to highlight here, 3 of them had a Swedish association, either Swedish founders or they were also physically located in Sweden. So ClickTech and Spotfire started out in Sweden, and Brio, which was a San Francisco Bay Area company, had Swedish founders. So time to pause again in our timeline and look at events. So in 1990, what's happened? Sir Tim Berners-Lee puts out the first web server and the first web browser. Incidentally, that first web browser is actually called World Wide Web, and it's launched initially on NextStep, which is Steve Jobs' next gig after Apple. And then at the same time, early 90s, a young researcher at the University of Illinois, Mark Andreessen, developed something called NCSA Mosaic. NCSA Mosaic will go on to become Mozilla, and then eventually the browser that we know as Firefox. Many other contributions along the way, but that's where it all started. So what's the point? The point is that the web is really about to take over the entire world. And just like it transformed every other industry, it's also going to seriously transform the BI industry. All right, so moving on in our timeline, it's the late 90s, and veterans of Redbrick, Cognos, and an entrepreneur who was working with Metaphor in the early days get together and form Enquire Software. Enquire has two innovations, two big innovations. One is this idea of what today is referred to as a data virtualization layer. You can think about it like a virtual database that can access data wherever it lives. And Enquire has an extremely sophisticated and extremely capable version of this. And the second thing really is this laser focus on a user experience that's purpose-built for the internet era. Now, these two things, are truly unique and a first in the world of BI. The other thing that starts to happen is, the dot bomb of the 2000s, early 2000s, and in 2001, Enquire ends up having a short shelf life and is acquired by Siebel. I remember I was there. It was fairly tumultuous times, but we made it out alive. But under the Siebel Analytics branding, the Enquire technology really starts to gain some steam and gain quite a bit of market success. This time, another really unique and seminal innovation happens. So far, all BI tool vendors have really treated, their end visualizations as sort of the end result of their users' workflow. Pretty matter-of-factly, it's a chart, it's a table. Now along comes Tableau, and they completely, flip that idea on its head. They really formalize this concept of, a visual grammar of data visualizations. They're building on decades of HCI research and statistics research. There's work by Leland Wilkinson called The Grammar of Graphics. There's work by a French cartographer from the 1960s focusing on very similar concepts and ideas. And of course, they take that, add their own unique research to it, and produce Tableau. And Tableau really formalizes this idea of a visual grammar for data visualization. And this is a completely unique idea that's going to influence every BI tool going forward, literally every tool. They start to adopt that way of thinking about data. And what it really does is it really encourages people to think about visual exploration of data and really, browsing and navigating data visually and learning these ideas of data being applied to a certain grammar concept, producing a certain effect on this sort of blank visual canvas. And it's an incredibly powerful innovation. Their one sin, if you will, is that they're a desktop tool instead of a sort of a web or internet tool. That has a silver lining. It means it's very easy for the spreadsheet crowd to adopt, and they gain legions of fans. Another very interesting innovation, same time frame, built by our very own Matt Malella, is something called Hyperion Smart View. So much as Metaphor did, in the mid 80s, was trying to bring together this no-code experience to the relational systems of the day. What SmartView is doing is bringing the spreadsheet worker to the Cube engine. The spreadsheet worker still has the same problem of compute capacity, and they're working in a constrained compute environment, whereas these Cube engines or these OLAP engines like Essbase have all the power in the world and can really bring speed of thought analysis to this knowledge worker's day-to-day life. And SmartView is a really unique innovation in that it allows that use of that familiar spreadsheet interface with this Cube engine in a completely seamless and frictionless way. And it becomes extremely popular. It's still used by finance departments all over the world, and is extremely powerful and popular tool. All right, at this point in time, we've talked a lot about our bottom axis, but what's going on our top axis? So sort of a quiet revolution's been taking place. As engineers have been, scaling systems for the internet era, building these internet-focused services, this idea of distributed computing is really starting to take form. Mass computing is getting cheaper and cheaper. Ideas about distributed computing are becoming more prevalent. And in 2004, Google published their MapReduce paper. And this has a massive knock-on effect in all industries, including the BI and analytics industry. The sort of, the second half of the 2000s and the early 2010s see a vast number of solutions emerge that are bringing distributed computing principles to analytics workloads. Things like distributed versions of columnar databases, distributed in-memory engines for processing analytic workloads and the like. You've got other types of innovations happening. So Oracle does a vertically integrated appliance called Exadata and Exalytics, which I haven't mentioned here, but these things are doing hardware and software together, as well as bringing together distributed systems technology to really up the ante again for analytics databases, allowing people to analyze larger and larger volumes of data. You've got Google BigQuery, AWS Redshift happening in the 2010s as well, and really a revolution taking place on the back end side of analytic systems. On the front end side, a few different stories play out. So in sort of the mid 2000s is what we like to call the grand consolidation happened. Essentially, every BI vendor of note, gets acquired. So the hype cycle is big. The growth of BI is expected to be massive, and all of the large enterprise software vendors buy up all the BI systems of note. So Oracle via Siebel buys Siebel Analytics, and it turns into Oracle BI, which is what part of our team. SAP buys Business Objects. Oracle also buys Hyperion, the makers of Essbase and SmartView, and IBM buys up Cognos. And so as a consequence, we get a whole new wave of startups emerge. And these new startups, as with every wave of startups, is bringing new and fresh ideas to the BI world. You get people like Sisense, which brings its idea of something they referred to as in-chip analytics. And what are they really doing? They are bringing CPU innovations like vector processing instructions and so on to analytics engines. And they build a purpose-built analytics engine that offers incredibly fast performance by leveraging those CPU types of innovations. You get people like Looker, which was founded by a team that previously built compilers and compiler tools. And they bring that way of thinking to BI tools. So they treat the entire BI data model as source code. And ideas about source code and check-ins and commits, and really thinking about the BI data model like a big compile job. It's a truly unique way of thinking about it, and becomes extremely popular and spawns a whole sort of subfield of data ops, if you will, where people start to bring this idea of code to BI systems. As well as other market leaders start to emerge. Power BI, which is one of the largest vendors in this space today, emerges in the early 2010s. Not quite under that brand, but the technologies that will eventually get packaged together as Power BI show up in the early 10s, and in 2014, Power BI itself emerges. So the other thing that's going on for us at this time is, and as I promised, I'll put more weight on ourselves, is Oracle as a whole is going through a consolidation of its public cloud strategy. And by the second half of the 2010s, that strategy is firmly established with a full stack of infrastructure, platform, as well as the BI tools. And in 2017, we relaunched, after a few earlier iterations, something that we refer to as Oracle Analytics Cloud. And that's sort of the demo you saw earlier today. That's our flagship product. We launched it in 2017, and we've been growing it since then. So with that whirlwind timeline out of the way, what's next, right? Reassuringly, the mission still hasn't changed. It's what we said at the beginning. It's still about bringing, the scientific process, a sense of rigor to business decision making, and leveraging, of course, data to do that. The change that has happened is that analytics is really everywhere. It's omnipresent, whether we're talking about, analytics embedded into day-to-day business applications, like you see on the top left, That's Oracle's own human capital management software and the embedded analytics that go along with it that our team builds, or whether it's the screenshot in the middle, which is from my personal NAS device at home, where there's all sorts of analytic features embedded into that. And last but not least, in the personal health space. We're all wearing these things on our wrists that are tracking all aspects of our bodies, our movement, and giving us back detailed analysis of that. So the world is really becoming more and more analytics driven, and the future is pretty bright. Where are our R&D teams spending their time? Well, the volume of data that the world is tracking is growing at an exponential pace. And the need for machine automation to understand that data is increasingly becoming more and more important. And so our teams are spending a lot of time, leveraging machine learning and AI advances and applying them to BI-style workloads, essentially, automating the process of insight discovery. How do you allow the human in the equation to really apply their own unique human intuition, how to ask more important questions, and how do we take the basic process of guiding insights, from the land of a lot of manual work by people to machines. Tons of work in this area, and at least I am really looking forward to the coming years ahead. I think it's going to be an exciting time. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you for your time today, and I hope you enjoyed our little brief timeline. Thank you.